Congratulations on the film.
Thank you very much.
So, when the Wachowskis send you a script, do you even bother to read it anymore, or do you just phone them back and say, you know what? Yeah.
No, I definitely read it. And in this case, I'd read the book, actually. When we were doing V for Vendetta, I'd read Cloud Atlas back then, and we talked about it very excitedly. Not as a film, but just as a book. And then I heard some years later that they were working. They'd got the rights and they were working on the script. So, no, when Andy rang me and said, it's going to happen and the script's arriving tomorrow, I knew the material anyway. So, and these are the characters we'd like you to play. So it all kind of came in a bit of a rush, and that was wonderful. So I was kind of pretty prepared for this one.
Because that's the thing that's so unusual about this. I just spoke with them, and they said it was kind of a revelation when they thought, oh, we'll have the same actors play different characters. So when you're looking through all of this, were there any reservations about playing such a variety of characters, and there's heavy makeup involved and lots of things? Any reservations at all?
No, initially, absolutely no reservations at all. The last thing on my mind, in fact, is complete thrill embracing the idea of it. I think it was a brilliant idea. And ultimately now, when I see the film, I think it's the great thing. One of the great things about the film is that what that sense of ensemble brings to the film is it gives it a sense of playfulness that it wouldn't otherwise have. So when they told me that idea initially, and these are the 6 characters, we want you to be one in each storyline, and he's essentially, at this stage we're calling him the antagonist, and but then there were other links that became clearer. No, that was initially a real thrill. I mean, everyone said, we want you to play Noakes. I said, what? You, really? Oh, are we doing that? Are we kind of doing like men play women, women play men? Yes, and obviously there were other racial changes as well. So no, that idea was something that was absolutely thrilling. But then the reality of that and the practicalities of that and the challenges of that then become kind of, okay, so how are we actually doing this and how are we doing that? And but that's always the way. Like if the idea grabs you in the gut, that's something you should definitely do.
So films are so fragmented in the way that they're made anyway. You start in the middle, you shoot a scene from the end, you go back and forth. The amount of prep that must have gone in, planning that must have gone in. So I assume then that you would have shot all of the Noakes scenes in one go and then moved on to a different thing. You're smiling as to say no. Is that
wrong?
Really?
Yeah, no, absolutely not. There was a pretty definite schedule. Well, it was the schedule that was set in stone. But there were also locations we were working at. So, for instance, I started in Glasgow and with Tom's unit. Lana and Andy were in Mallorca, and so they were shooting one sequence. But also because they were in Mallorca, the Mallorca had been chosen as a location because that's where they could do all the boat scenes. But also they could do the walking scenes. With Zachary and Merinim,
right.
And so that was another story. But so they would do elements of certain stories in certain locations. When we were in Glasgow, we were doing the San Francisco shootout with the car crash and the fire hydrant with Smoke and Napier and Louisa Ray, day 1, day 2, and then we were also then doing elements of the Cavendish story at the Scottish and the Ayres and Frobisher story, the exteriors of those scenes, because we were doing the interiors in Berlin. So there were definitely, right from the word go, those stories you weren't going to stay in one block. To some extent, some of them got, once you were in one room, if most of that particular story took place in one set, then of course you tend to shoot most of one story out before moving on to the other. But no, there were times, weeks when I think 1 week I had 5 characters in a week.
Well, was it like being in repertory or something like that, where you're, today we're doing Richard III, tomorrow we're going to do As You Like It, the next day?
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the very thing I think is really interesting about the film, and that was the initial excitement of playing many characters. Actually, kind of translates to the film on the screen, and what it does to a viewer is that you can't kind of get lost in a character, in a character's world. You're constantly being reminded that, oh, these are actors, because it's the same actor who played that other role in that other scene. And so there is a sort of sense of repertory company. There is a sort of wonderful theatrical sense to it that lends a playfulness to the film. And I think that's really delightful, and it's kind of critical to the way in which the stories are ingested. You know, I think you're still getting the stories, but you're also thinking about the way in which they're being told.
Well, for me, what it did is it kept my mind working all the way through it, because there's a bit of a Where's Waldo game, I guess, that you can play. Is that Hugo Weaving with the wig, or is it, there's that game, right? But then also the connections start to be made, and you start to not only identify actors from century to century or year to year or whatever, but behavior as well. And then you start thinking, oh, this is how everyone is connected. Yeah. We're doomed to repeat the sins of our past, that kind of thing. And it does. It makes it gets the gears turning.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I love all those connected moments too, where one character will be asking another character something. James Darcy's character is the interviewer, talking to Son Mi, asking about love, and seeing the repercussion, the reverberations in his eyes, and that character is not aware really. He's not aware of Frobisher.
Right.
But the actor, obviously, that he's also played Sixsmith in that fantastic love story, and so the idea of love, seeing the question and what's going on in James's eyes, his Korean eyes, reverberates with you as a viewer in a really profound way, and it's a really important moment in the film, that I think, when he realizes that something that. Well, you realize in his face something that the character, doesn't necessarily realize himself, and I love that about the film.
Well, it's interesting because I read somewhere that Halle Berry said, now that she's seen the movie, it's a different thing than it was when she read it, because she said when you read this, it's mind-boggling to a certain extent. It doesn't look like a script that maybe you've seen before, the kind of script that you've seen before. And tell me your impression. Did you feel the same way, or did you, because you were so familiar with the book, did you have and had discussed it with the Wachowskis and so forth, did it resonate more with you on the page or on the screen?
No, I certainly didn't have I think if I'd come to the screenplay cold without having read the book, or if it hadn't been sourced from a novel, if it was a sort of completely original screenplay, then it would be much more. You would have to you'd read it and you'd want to go back and read it again, and then you'd probably want to chop up I'm just going to read these scenes from this story, and then I'm going to go back and read this story. So you're just getting a sense of that. And I remember Tom Hanks having all his stories separately, and as actors we had to approach each story separately, ultimately. But the initial reading of the script for me was I was actually really joyful and playful, because I knew the stories and I knew all the characters, and so it wasn't. What was interesting for me was to see all the other links that they were making. That David Mitchell wasn't necessarily making, or he was alluding to or suggesting that they kind of ran with, and how they'd structured the piece like a mosaic rather than as a series of half stories leading up to the central story, and then getting the second half of all the stories. So that was what was fascinating for me, and then in the read, seeing how one story can parallel another one because people are in sort of the same place, and then you get this strong sense of life, as you were saying, sort of life repeating itself, and certain constructs in the world just being repeated time and time again, and certain power games being repeated time and time again, and then you realize, this same actor is playing all these characters, and they're all, as you say, having the same kind of attitude to life. Yeah. Like most of my characters were agents of control or enforcement, or attempting to limit imagination, incarcerate people, stop certain stories from getting out into the world, or just going out and killing people. And then you go up to Georgie. I mean, he's just he actually doesn't exist as an embodied figure. He's a fear which is inside Zachary's head. So he's literally a devil. So he's a fear.
I enjoyed that segment of the film so much, and it took me a while to catch on that it's actually in the future. And I don't want to give anything away, and I'll be careful about this how we talk about it. But it's 106 years after the fall, right? And so I loved the idea that there is a huge lore that goes, centuries of it. Because when you first meet them, you think, well, we're back at the beginning of time now, and so it's a nice little switch. But the idea that you play a fear that exists in Zachary's head is something that's so primal and so primal is the only word you can use to describe it, really, and that image of fear hasn't changed over 100 centuries or whatever.
Exactly.
I found that really interesting. The idea that the things that scare us today are probably going to be the things that scare us in 200 years.
And it's it's a post-apocalyptic world, and yet it's as you say, it's like it's a very barbaric world in which there are tribes and cannibals and really hokey belief systems, and I mean, not to say that we don't have hokey belief systems now, we do, but then there's also that other realization as that story progresses that there's this other world, and in fact it isn't past, but that story very much embodies past history and future history, but the sense that devils and hell can exist in that way. It's wonderful that exists in that story, because it's something that will always be with us. Those fears.
Did you watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest at all as research for this?
Yeah, of course I did. I mean, Nurse Noakes is a Ratchet-like character, and her performance is so sublime in that. The thing I love about Ratchet is that she's kind of sexy and sweet and caring, but she's like ice as well. So I definitely, I'd obviously seen it before, but I did go back because I knew I was playing Noakes. I thought, well, this is an obvious reference for me, and then thought, well, and then I looked at the design concept for the makeup, and I thought, okay, well, I can't quite go into that area, but yeah, it was a touchstone for me. But and Tom and I talked about that too. But then it kind of she's more monstrous. She's much more monstrous, and also the tone of the piece is really quite broadly comedic. The Cavendish story, both in the book and in the film,
it's almost like Benny Hill at certain points, particularly with the car. Yeah. And I like when you're, again, don't give anything away, but you're locked in the cell, the room, and then you hold up your cell phone, and he's like, damn it, it's just it's a farce.
Yeah, it is. Or when he's picked up by the gardener bodily, and it's quite funny, and then you cut to a wide shot of him still walking, but he's walking on air, being held by the gardener, and he can't escape. And it's kind of wonderful physical gags. Yeah. And for Tom, that was a great thing to shoot, because he'd never really shot that sort of comedy before, I don't think. And originally, I don't think was going to shoot that story, but that was one of the stories that was to do with location. I think because Tom was shooting in Scotland, he therefore had to take the Cavendish story, and because Lana and Andy were shooting in Mallorca, I think they then had to take the Ewing story, and I think initially that was going to be the other way around.
Mr. Weaving, thank you so much. A pleasure to speak to you.
Yeah, my
pleasure.
Thank you.